Please note that this episode contains depictions and stories of siblings lost by homicide, suicide, and/or domestic violence. Some people may find these stories activating, triggering, and/or disturbing. Please see our show notes for additional resources and to understand the full content of the episode.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Surviving Siblings podcast. Today I have Leigh Smith joining me, and she's going to share the story of her sister, Beth. Leigh, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So, Leigh, what I'd love for you to do is kind of tell us a little bit about Beth and tell us a little bit about your relationship and go back to childhood. And obviously, we're going to talk about your experience losing Beth and so much more on this episode. So take it away.
All right. Beth was 3 years older than me. We have an older brother as well, but she was the middle. So I'm the baby. We had a wonderful childhood. Picture perfect. Trips, pool in the backyard. I looked up to her like crazy. She was tons of friends, popular, beautiful, good at everything she did, gifted, talented, so funny. Just, I was obsessed with her. I mean, any chance I could be around her and her friends, I would spy on them. And, she always swatted me away, but she was just in my eyes, like, so Christmas, when she turned 16, she got a brand new car. That February, 96, she was alone, and got into a pretty bad car accident. She had a traumatic brain injury. She slipped on like black ice and went into a ditch. She was alone, but she didn't have a bruise on her body. She went to the hospital, was in a coma for about 2 weeks. I would say this was a turning point in all of our lives. I was 13 at the time. This was probably the first loss I felt of her and my family. I mean, at this moment, I was completely thrust into a new role as a sibling. The prognosis wasn't good. Her brain continued to swell. We were kind of told to expect she wouldn't make it. But she's a fighter. She made it. But she was kind of like a baby again. We had to basically like welcome her back into the world as her brain healed. And she was never the same. We had to teach her how to walk, talk, use her voice, pick up crayons. We had to thicken her liquids, put her in chair in the shower. And I became like, along with my parents, just a caretaker. And I sort of just sunk into the background, I guess.
Right.
And then she, anyone that's experienced traumatic brain injuries, I mean, she got back to where she could go to school after about a year. So she went back to high school. And at that point, all of her friends were like, partying, and they were like, yeah, Beth is back, even though she was like literally like had to still use like a wheelchair. And
they weren't really understanding like the gravity behind this.
Yes,
like how
correct.
intense
Because
this
they were
was.
teenagers. Yeah.
Right.
And so they were, smoking weed and drinking and just partying. And so my parents really didn't know. So they would like take her out and be like, all right, Beth, you're back. Like, let's go party. And, her brain was, just never the same. So
Right.
that just kind of began the next 25 years of her life. Yeah. So she was 16 and just started with weed, drinking, and then I think she even went to cocaine. At that point, my parents were getting divorced. I mean, tragedies often break up families. So my parents got divorced when I was 14. I stayed with my dad in our beautiful, large family house that was just me and him. And she was sent off to rehab. And my mom had moved out. And, she probably went to 6 different rehabs throughout the country. Like, And then, I mean, it's just 25 years of like, it's almost a blur in my head because it's like the same story on repeat over and over again. Like
Right. A
different
cycle.
rehab, yeah, different city. This time when you start, oh yeah, she's got a job. Okay, well, oh, she got fired from that. Oh, she's using again. What? She's using? How could she be using? Like thought she was doing so well. Okay, back to another rehab. And then just all the lying, the even stealing, just this constant pattern. And as her little sister, I was so angry a lot of the times. It was just so painful. Like, why couldn't you just get it together? Like, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you?
Hmm.
Um, I mean, countless cities. She was the longest she was in Chicago. But it was just my mom. My mom started to just prop her up, like enable her. She just never wanted to give up on Beth. Um, my dad kind of took the tough love approach. He lives about an hour away. So he was just, you know, had very clear boundaries. So it created a lot of tension between me and my mom because, like, all the attention it just continued to be on my sister. Um,
Yeah.
so eventually she moved to Louisville and she moved in with my mom. And that was like a really last hope. She was really doing good, had this job she loved with mentally disabled. She always worked with the underprivileged. Even in Chicago, she worked with underprivileged Hispanics. I mean, throughout everything, just had a caring heart, but she could never, she just could never make it. It was like right when she was there, she'd do something stupid and
Hmm.
crash a car, get a DUI, or just something legal always happened. Um, but my mom just always helped her get it back together. And it was really hard for me because, like, I was somewhere between my dad and my mom. My dad was pretty hard nosed, and my mom was like, I'll do everything. And I saw both of my parents in these roles, and like, I felt somewhere in between. And like, I loved her so much, but like, it was so painful. So eventually, she moved in with my mom. Same old thing. I mean, my mom, she got a DUI. She lost her job, got another job. I mean, just the same cycle. So
Right.
eventually, she moved into her own apartment because she was doing really well. And my mom, was like, okay, you've lived with me for like 4 years. You need to get out. So at that point, she started using again. And we took her to court under this law called Casey's Law here where I live. And it mandated her to go to rehab. She went to rehab.
So what is Casey's law? Just so people know, Leigh. What is the
I'm
definition?
not sure. It's a law that you are saying that this person is a harm to themselves. And you,
Most states have something like that.
Mhm.
So, yep.
Yes,
Okay, I know what you're talking about.
yeah.
Perfect. Yep.
So
Mhm.
we took her to court. Me, my mom, and my sister all went to court and just sitting there. And she knew why we were taking her, and she was like, "Okay, I'm going to do it." No contest. So they mandated her to go to this rehab locally, and she got out, and she was doing so well. At that point, she was taking what seemed like to be working. It was called Vivitrol, because she had done all the methadone, the Suboxone, which I didn't even realize you could like trade on the street for drugs. It's like all these tricks and things that people can do.
Right. Yeah.
Anyways, Vivitrol was amazing because it was a monthly injection, and I mean, it was like this magical like drug.
Mhm.
So she started working for this insurance company, was just like thriving. And we just had her last year on this planet, 2021, was just so wonderful and normal. And we were like, wow, this is great. And it's just out of nowhere, out of nowhere, she was dead. like we just blindsided by it because we really had thought maybe this was it. And
Right.
so the last night we spent together, my mom and her partner had us over here for dinner, and it was me and my sister, my husband and my kids, and it was just such a normal evening. And she was just doing laundry, and we were just hanging out, and she was just like, "Well, I gotta go. I gotta go work tomorrow." And we're like, "Okay." And I just remember we just had like the best night, and we gave each other the best hug. And I was like, felt so good to have my sister back.
You felt hope,
And
right? Like
yeah,
you felt hope. You felt
yeah,
like she's finally got it. Like,
yeah,
here we go. Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
She was 41, and I was like, this is awesome.
Hmm.
And we gave each other. I just remember this hug we gave each other. It was like it's really intense hug. And we weren't really big huggers, but I just remember that hug. And I was like, I love you. I'm so proud of you. Um, and she was like, I love you. She called me Lee Bird. She was like, Lee Bird, I love you too so much. And, she just adored my kids. And so that was Sunday night. And then Wednesday I was off work, and my mom called, and she was like, I haven't, it's not unlike that we don't hear from Beth for a few days, but she was like, I haven't heard from Beth in a few days. And I was like, oh, okay. And I kind of just had a sinking feeling. Like immediately I was like, oh, okay. And Beth lived near me in an apartment, and she was like, do you mind just riding over there and seeing if her car's there? And I was like, okay. And I just got in my car, and I was already shaking. It was like, I knew.
We hope you're enjoying this incredible episode of the Surviving Siblings podcast. I'm your host, Maya Roffler. We'll be back in just a minute after hearing from our incredible sponsor. Are you a bereaved sibling, a forgotten mourner, or as we call it here on the Surviving Siblings podcast, a surviving sibling? Well, I am too. My name is Maya, and I'm the host of the Surviving Siblings podcast. I created this show for siblings just like you to help you along your grief journey. And now I've created even more resources to help you along this lifelong journey. I wrote the grief guide for the surviving siblings so that you and I can travel along this journey together. Within the guide, it has prompts to help you with a validation exercise that helps you validate your feelings of grief. We also talk about the stages of grief, and we also have a timeline exercise that helps you journal as you continue along your grief journey. I share tips throughout the guide on my personal grief journey as well and what worked for me. You can find this guide on Amazon.com. You can also click the link in the show notes. And of course, you can visit our incredible website, thesurvivingsiblings.com. In addition to finding the grief guide, you'll find merchandise that supports you as the surviving sibling, as well as our show. You'll also find our support group that meets every month, our Ask Me Anything Mondays, and so much more. So make sure to visit thesurvivingsiblings.com for more information, and don't forget to order your grief guide today.
And so I drove to her apartment, and I saw her car parked, and I was like, I just felt like my heart had fallen to the floor. So I called my mom, and I said, Mom, her car's here. And my mom's like, well, I'm coming over with the key, and we're going to go in there. So my mom lives close by too. So she was on her way over, and I just called my dad. I call him when I'm like, I need a voice of reason. And he was like,
Right.
he was just like, absolutely not. Do not go in there. And I was like, I went up to the window and like knocked, but I was like, I just knew. He was like, call the police right now. And called the police, and they came. And I mean, they went in, and, it's just like slow motion in my mind, just the way he walked out and with his head looking at the ground. And he was just, I knew, and I'll never forget. He just said, ladies, I'm sorry, she is beyond help. And we just, like, my mom's scream is,
in your
it
mind and
haunts me.
heart
It
forever.
haunts me. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but from that point on, I mean, it's like I became this like robot. I mean, I just took control of everything, you know? It was like this force went through me, and I got my mom out of there. I didn't want her to see the body being brought out. I answered all the questions. I was just like, boom, 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 boom. And I said, let's go to my house. And then called the funeral home. I was like, my husband came home from work. We were making checklist. I made arrangements at the funeral home. We went there, and I was like, okay, like this urn, da 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 da. Mom, do you like this? Da da da. I mean, I was just like on it. I wrote the eulogy like in the middle of the night one night. I mean, it was
God, we
like
have so much in common, Leigh. You're giving me chills. Like, yeah, you go into this
yeah,
zone. Like,
yeah,
I think this is a testament to what you were saying earlier in your story about how you assumed like the older sibling role
yeah.
very early on when this
Mhm,
happened when she was 16. This carried all the way
mhm,
25 years on for you
mhm.
because that is definitely, as you know, in my story, I went into that mode too. It was like,
Yeah.
I picked out an urn for my brother, for
Mhm.
both my father and I. And I mean, I like connect, and I'm sure a lot of you guys will connect with
Yeah.
this as well. We go into the zone because we assume a lot of the responsibility because our parents are just so
Yes,
overwhelmed. Understandably so, but
absolutely.
still, it's something that needs to be talked about. So,
Yeah.
wow. Okay. So
Um,
you guys are
mm,
making lists. Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then like I'm talking to the funeral home all the time, and like he's like telling me the autopsy and da, 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 and we're like for sure we want to hit her to be cremated, like no question, you know. Um, and he told me when it was going to be done, and my mom didn't want to know, and I knew when the cremation was happening, and the autopsy it came back eventually that there I mean zero heroin in her body. It was 100% fentanyl. Um so when she relapsed, I mean my understanding is, you know, she never relapsed and back into heroin. When she relapsed, it was just like over, it was over. And she didn't stand a chance. I mean, you don't stand a chance against fentanyl.
No.
Um, so she had been there laying in her apartment for 2 days alone, and just felt like very symbolic kind of her life and her journey, that she died alone. And that will always haunt me, that she
Right.
was there like alone, like she always was in life,
Yeah.
um, but
How did you guys I mean, obviously you got the autopsy, but
mhm,
to your knowledge, she had been doing great. She was
mhm,
taking this medication, she was going
mhm.
in to the doctor. So, did you guys ever find out? And I don't know, you have to tell me your journey here, but did you find out what happened or who gave this to her or anything like that? Or did she just have a moment that Monday or that Sunday night? Like, what
Right.
did we know? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know she started smoking weed again, but I wasn't even worried about that, I was like,
Right.
"Whatever, that's fine, whatever." Um, but her Vivitrol insurance was only gonna cover a year of this medication. So, it was within that month that she was going off of it. Um, so I think she was starting to crave again, and she didn't have the money to get the Vivitrol out of pocket.
And that was a
So
trigger for her, I'm sure,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Like coming off of it.
absolutely.
And like not just physical, I found through a lot of these stories and also through my experience with my brother being really into drugs. Um, it's a mental thing too. Like if they
Yeah,
know they can't have access to something, right? That's making them
yeah.
feel leveled. So,
Oh, yeah.
wow.
And
Mhm.
I think she always really thought, like, she could, like, manage it, like because she was kind of like I mean, she was kind of somehow this functional, at times, addict,
Mhm.
which was bizarre. Like, she would be doing it for, like, 6 months, and then I'd be like, "What? Like, how are you going to work?" And then it
that's
was,
my mindset too. I'm like, how do
yeah,
you do, like, I was always surprised
yeah,
with my brother too. I'm like, how are you? And then he obviously went into a path that was quite destructive and trusted people he shouldn't have, which is a whole
yeah,
other, story that
right.
I've shared.
Mm,
But that's so interesting that you say that. And I
mm.
think it's, again, something I think all of you guys who have gone through a similar loss can relate to as well. Like, we then reflect back and we're like, wait, you've been
Yeah,
using it for 6 months, a year, or
yeah,
whatever it's, and then you start thinking, oh, well, maybe that moment was a little weird, or maybe that holiday was a
yeah,
little off, or like it starts to make sense. But
yeah,
those are high functioning addicts. And
yeah.
it kind of scares you a little bit because you're like, whoa, I didn't even realize. And it this, I'm curious about your opinion about this too, Lee, since you have gone through this and for so many years with Beth. You know, it's interesting to me because I'm like, how much energy does it take to, one, take the, seek out, whatever you're using, whether it's
Okay.
heroin or, any a plethora of things, right? Which is typically the case when you go down this path. But then there's an additional layer of energy that's put out to, like, not have people know, like you, Lee, or your
Right,
mom or your dad, that you're using. And that's always
right.
been a thing for me. Did you
Yeah,
ever have that moment too where, like, God, isn't that a lot of energy that you're
yeah,
putting into
yeah.
this to seek it out, but also cover it up?
Yes,
It's interesting.
yes. It
Yeah.
it just seemed like so exhausting. I mean, there was so much anger at her during that time, and it's not until she's passed away that I'm like, she was never gonna beat it, ever.
Yeah.
She was never going to beat this was a cancer for her that had been, she already had compromised judgment because of her brain injury. So the time she was sober, it was like she was like every day was a struggle, because and the question always was is she like this because of her brain injury or because of decades of drug use? That was always like the family's like, and I'm like, well, I mean, it's probably a combination, but she's never had any brain studies done from her traumatic brain injury. But like balancing,
Really? How
yeah,
interesting.
like
Wow. So
afterwards, it
you
was
were
just
kind of
like,
always guessing.
yeah.
Yeah, like,
And so that's where like sympathy would come in. And I'd be like, oh my God, like we are total assholes because, like she's just not like us. She's not going to function like us. Like she's forgetful. She says inappropriate things. Even her gaze was off in one eye. I mean,
wow.
her whole brain was different. But then it's like, well, I mean, she has been a heroin addict for 20 years. And, what does that do to you? So she was never gonna beat it, and it was a monster too big for her, and even people that are of normal brain capacity can't beat it half the time. So,
Yeah.
um, it was just sad though, like, her existence. She was alone all the time in her apartment, she couldn't keep relationships. Her relationships were drug relationships. Any boyfriend she had, it was abusive. She didn't know how to nurture a relationship. She felt so terrible about herself all the time. So the only thing she could do was just turn to drugs. It was just a really sad existence, really sad. And just the way she had to sneak to get the money to do the drugs and like, I think she was just really freaking tired. Um, and I don't know. I don't, there's so many ways to look at it, but I like to look at her final year and her death. There was a little bit of grace because it wasn't a tumultuous time in her family. It was actually really nice and peaceful. And we didn't watch her go down this path again with heroin. It was like, I'm out. It was just like,
Yeah.
I'm out. And sometimes me and my mom think like, wow, like it could have been so awful her final days, but it was so good. And I think in some way there's like grace to all this because she I think she wanted so bad to be free of this. And I think it broke her heart to put us through this. And um it was this weird like feeling like she wanted to just be my big sister finally.
Yeah.
And she never got to do that. And she'd always say, I wish I could just like be the big sister to you, Leigh. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, I love you. But she was tired, and she was tired of the pain, and she was tired of hurting everybody. And I think she just wanted to be free from all that. And I don't think it was intentional, but I feel like there was some grace to it all. I really do. So that brings me comfort, because no one is wrapped up in guilt. Should I have done this or that? We did everything. I mean, we literally took her to court. There was nothing more to do. There was no more money
It's
for
absolutely
rehabs.
not.
No.
There's nothing physically, mentally, emotionally that
No.
you could have done. Just, listening to what we've talked about so far and,
Yeah.
reading your story and meeting you. Yeah. I mean, what else can you do? Right. I mean, that's the really difficult part when people are struggling with addiction and I mean, many different things too. Right.
Mhm.
And she had many layers in her story. And that's really difficult because we want to help and we want to
Mhm.
help as much as we can. But something has to come from within inside the person that we're trying to help
Mhm.
too. Like you
Absolutely.
can't, you can't. I mean, they're
Absolutely.
not a child or an infant, right? You
Right.
have to like have some reciprocation, and yeah, that's really heavy,
Really. Yeah.
Leigh. But I appreciate you like sharing so much and being so vulnerable
Yeah.
about this. Yeah,
I mean, it's a very multi-layered, um, complex, like it's the head injury and then the drug addiction and,
mhm,
already losing her one time and then, losing her again. So
mhm.
there was a lot of already grief that I had already felt when I was younger.
Right.
But, yeah, yeah.
That's
So,
understandable. That's
mhm,
It's like you've gone through loss multiple times.
mhm,
And I felt this way with my brother too because he would go through these cycles and it's interesting because every sibling that I talk to, I mean people in general, but
mhm.
obviously we talk about siblings here, right?
Yeah.
And every sibling that I talk to that has had or has siblings that have gone through drug addiction, there's a cycle. There's always a cycle that
Yeah.
happens and then you start to see them go up and then you see them go down and then you see them
Yeah.
go up and you go down. And it's a roller coaster. I mean, that's what it is. And
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
tough, but I think in your story, every story is unique, but your story is unique in the sense that you lost her at such a
Mhm,
significant age. I mean,
mhm, right,
13, that was a
mhm,
significant age for me too, and I think it's significant in general.
mhm,
And you're not quite a teenager, like you are, but
mhm,
you're not. Like you're like
mhm.
preteenish age still,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
you're
absolutely.
kind of coming into,
Ye
you're almost to high school.
Yeah.
That's a very impressionable age, like very
Yes.
impressionable. Like high school, you start to get like your click and
Yeah.
your attitude, and
Yes,
like, but 13,
absolutely.
like
Yeah.
that's a
Mhm,
lot, and that's a lot of responsibility to take on. And I think to shift because we talk about that a lot on this show too, Leigh.
mhm,
So to shift roles
mhm,
that happened for you then because
mhm. Oh, yeah.
that was your first loss, like you
Mhm,
said. So, when we have people on the show that talk about losing siblings at a young age, you fit that as
mhm,
well, right? So you've
mhm,
lost twice, and that's
mhm,
really significant
mhm,
the in your story and telling
mhm,
that because when you lose as a child,
mhm,
because at 13 you're still a child, guys.
mhm.
You're still a
Yes.
child and evolving and growing, but when you lose, you change the order of the family. You really
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
And I think I think it's interesting that you use the term it's haunting
Mhm,
for a lot of different things because I'm sure that really was haunting for you for
mhm.
25 years
Yeah.
because it shifted your family dynamic forever,
Oh, yeah.
including the fact that your parents got divorced. Like that's
Uh-huh.
huge.
That was,
Mhm.
like, not even a year later, they were divorced, so, like, it was yeah, it was traumatizing. I had a pretty rough time, with all the changes.
How did tell us about that? Let's talk about when you were younger, and then we're gonna fast forward again to
Mhm.
when, you lost Beth. How did you make it through that? Because you just seem so grounded and so full of love,
Uh,
and I love your energy, and I'm sure you guys
thank
do as
you.
well. But no, I'm serious though. Like for me, 13, it's so interesting how
Yeah.
every person I have on here, I have a connection with. 13 was significant for me too. That's when
Yeah.
my parents split up. So it's
Yeah.
significant. And I assumed a mother role to my youngest sibling, and
Okay.
so I really understand where you're coming from, but it changes you. Tell us how
Mhm.
you kind of moved through that because you took on such a caretaker role, and like,
Yeah,
how did you like move? Did you go off to school
I
when you
did.
graduated? Like, tell us a little bit. Yeah, tell us about that because her
Um,
trajectory is so different than yours. Yeah.
yeah. So she was bouncing all over the place. My brother he's older, but he is a wonderful guy, but he just kind of more or less like went off to do his like college thing.
Right.
Um, you know, that's how he kind of moved through his pain.
Hmm.
But I was primarily at home with my dad, and my mom's the one who had moved out, and I was really, really angry. Um, I was just an angry teen. Uh, I felt like I wasn't. I was just kind of like not really parented, I guess. Like I partied
Right.
all the time, and my dad. And now that I'm older, I'm like, well, my parents, like, I am now their age that they were then almost, and it's like they were humans too, and so they
Right.
were navigating my sister's addiction and divorce, and they looked at me, and I think I always was just like strong, and I gave the illusion that I could take care of myself. Um, but I kind of resented that in a way. I was like not really allowed to have problems, not really need anything. So I did at 18. I went to college 8 hours away in South Carolina, and just kind of wrapped that world around me for 4 years. Um, and
Did you
I
find that
mean,
to be like a healing time for you and like a,
no,
a, a good moment, or was difficult? Okay. Yeah, that's what I wanted to get to. Yeah.
yeah, no, I just, avoided and distracted. I mean, I made good grades. I always had, like, a sense about me to, like, do the right thing, like, a very responsible sense. I still got A's and graduated in 4 years, but, I partied, and I just avoided all those feelings that were always still there. And at that time, it was ups and downs with my sister, and, I just I tried to avoid and distract, because I was angry and I was mad at her, and why does this still keep happening?
Mhm.
So yeah, um, but as
When
I
do you
got
feel like
older,
you
yeah,
started? Yeah, I was going to say, when did you feel
yeah,
like you started to kind of open yourself up to feel some of those emotions? Did it take until her passing, or was it a progression of like allowing yourself to feel,
yeah.
close it off again? Like, tell us a little bit about how you
Well,
went through
I
that.
just always felt conflicting feelings because there was just this tug at my heart, like I just love you. You're my only sister, and She she was a wonderful human, and she was always so misunderstood, and she was so soulful, so funny, loved she just loved people, but it was always everything was always destroyed. Everything was so destroyed all the time. Anything good was always destroyed by drugs. Um, and I watched her just try. She tried to fit in with the family. And she tried to, like, make friends, but it was always, like, uncomfortable somehow. Everyone was on eggshells, that's what I'm looking for. Everybody's always on
Hmm.
eggshells, like and then she would get frustrated because she couldn't keep up with everybody, because of her mental capacity, and then she would just, like, get really frustrated, and she couldn't find her words fast enough, and she'd go outside at any family dinner and just start smoking, and, like, she just never felt like she could fit in anywhere,
Hmm.
in any circle, any normal circle. And I think she resented that a little bit about me, because once she moved back to Louisville, I at that point had 2 kids, doing well in my career, and she would just I think there was jealousy and resentment to me
Right.
because I was just able to function just fine. It was crazy. It was like back and forth resentment, but at the end of the day, like we loved each other like crazy, and you couldn't deny that sisterly bond we had. I mean, we had our own language almost. We had our own looks between each other. We can make each other laugh in 2 seconds. I mean, we knew exactly what to do to make each other laugh. And There
Yeah.
was that never went away. Like, even when I hated her the most, I still felt close to her.
Mhm.
And yeah, I miss her. I mean, I miss her.
I can see it. I can
Yeah.
see it as we're talking. I
Mhm.
see you, like, laughing. I still like,
Yeah.
there's so many emotions that are still running through you,
Yeah.
and I think a really good point to bring up here, Leigh, and I talk about this on some other episodes too, but this your story is definitely a testament. You can hold I think sometimes we feel in our grief journey, we feel guilty if,
Yeah.
we're still angry or upset, or we look back
Mhm.
on things and we allow ourselves to feel those different emotions, which again, you have two different losses with the same person.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge. And I hope, you know, your story is able to reach other people that are like, oh my God, no, I went through something
Yeah.
similar. It's bittersweet because I hope no one has to experience this. I
Right.
know we both feel the same way, right? But
Uh,
if you have experienced this, we hope this reaches you. And the important part, I think, about this specific, thing we're talking about here is that you can hold more than one emotion for someone.
mhm.
And I think that's something I've learned from you guys, from people that come on the
Mhm.
show. And it's something that I've learned in sharing my story because I used to feel a lot of guilt because I would be angry at my brother for trusting the wrong people and living a
Yeah.
lifestyle that he did and like all these things. And I got stuck in anger, as, I talk about
Yeah.
all the time. I think
Yes.
different people get stuck in different emotions.
Yes.
Depression's a top one too. People get really,
Yes.
guilt, there's certain ones. Anger's a big one too. And
Yeah.
so we connect on that one. Anger was
Yeah.
my go-to.
Yeah.
I was like, how
Yes.
could this happen? Like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
and you sort anger at different people, right? Like I'm sure
Mhm.
you felt a lot of anger towards the person that gave her fentanyl instead of heroin. I'm sure that
Yes.
you felt right. I mean, there's so
I
many, but
actually, like, found her phone, and, I mean, I was
did you?
during grief, the first year of I wouldn't even call grief hitting the first year.
Yeah.
It was and
It
maybe
doesn't. That's why I call it a
I know.
fog, Leigh.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yes.
like it's like and then you, like, come out of
Mhm,
this fog, it, like, dissipates, and then for me, anger sunk in. That
mhm,
was, like, for
mhm,
me, but
mhm.
you got the phone. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
What happened?
I got her
Yeah.
phone, and I mean, my husband wanted to kill me, but I found where she had been texting this drug dealer.
Thank God he didn't. Thank
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
hubby,
yeah,
for
I
not killing her.
know. But I mean, I was wild during that first year after she died. Like,
'Cause you get in the zone. You said
yeah,
it perfectly earlier. Because you get
yeah,
in the zone where you're like, "I gotta figure this out. What
yes,
happened?" Like, you just
yeah.
it's interesting. Yeah.
I was
Mhm.
like, it was like, I, I was like, hi. And so I just started texting him and I was like, do you know what you did? Da 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 da. And he was like, I don't know what
So
you're
you
talking about.
could open her phone and see
Mhm.
who had given her the
Yeah.
wow.
And then I thought,
That gives
I
me
mean, of
chills.
course, I like took it to the police. I thought I was like going to solve the case, and they were like, we are well
Mhm.
aware of this person. Like, this guy dealer has also killed 9 different individuals in this exact week. Yeah. So
I thought
I
you were
was
gonna say this year or something. A
no,
week? Week?
yeah. So he had just like been handing out fentanyl, like, candy, and
Candy.
not like 9 other families had to. I mean, I just texted him like, you don't know the lives you've destroyed. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, I went off on him. And
Mhm.
then all of a sudden a cloud of reason came over me and I was like, oh my God. So I like deleted, blocked the number and was I can't be
Right, 'cause that
texting
sinks
with
in and
it.
you're like, "Oh god, what if this person comes after me?" Because they're
Right.
dangerous. So you're like,
Yes.
I know where you're going with
Yeah.
this." Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, after like this crazy long text message telling him how I truly felt, using some very strong words, I was like, oh my God, like I have kids. I can't do this. So
Right.
but I mean, there was a lot of times like I just wanted to feel something other than whatever I was feeling, because I don't know if I was really feeling grief that first year, but it was like I needed to feel things. I'd go on like crazy exercise binges, or I don't know, I would probably drank too much. It was just like I needed to counterbalance this energy that was coursing its way through my body that I couldn't make sense of. I did go to grief counseling, which really helped, but it wasn't, it was just this, it was like I wanted to just burst, and I had to find
Yeah.
outlets, some of them healthy, some of them not. But at that point, I wasn't grieving. I was just physically somehow tortured and somehow just tortured physically, and I couldn't make sense of anything. Like you said, the
Yeah.
fog.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
so many of you guys can connect to this because I get messages about it all the time and people talking about it on TikTok lives, Instagram. And I think you have defined it in a way I've never heard anybody really talk about it. And I love that, Leigh. Thank you for sharing that because the first year, and it's interesting because some people it's like 2 years, some people it's like 6 months. It just
Yeah.
everyone's different. But we just say in general the first year. And I feel like that's like once you've lost someone, you kind of know what we're talking about. It's like we're not
Yeah.
saying like, okay, you lost someone, March of this, it's going to be
Yes.
exactly 1 year today.
It's
It's
not.
not that, but that's what we recall, right? Is like a
Mhm.
year. So it's the grief fog, right? It's the
Uh-huh.
year. And you so desperately, like you said this so perfectly, you so desperately want to feel something because you're feeling it, but you're not feeling it. You're not really
Yes.
feeling it. Like you're numb,
Yes.
but you have things raging through your veins.
Yeah.
Like it's torture, but you're not
Yeah.
actually feeling it. So then you overcompensate by, like you said, exercising,
Yes.
potentially drinking a lot, which I was
Yeah.
definitely guilty of all of
Yeah.
these things too. So
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, Leigh, yes, I
Yeah.
did the same stuff. And
Yeah.
you go to another intensity. And also I did the same thing as like, I thought I was going to be this detective and like figure it all out. I'm like, I
Yes.
got this. I'll have it done in a year.
Right.
That's funny. That's really
Right.
funny. And I
Yeah.
don't say that. And I know you don't say it either to discourage people, but that is a really delicate time. So pace yourself. Don't be like me or you and feel like you have to solve it right then and there. But there's more of a pacing about it. And there's more of a being an advocate for your sibling that you've lost versus feeling like you can't shoulder all the responsibility. And I
No.
wish someone had told me that. And I'm sure you
Right.
connect with that too, based on your story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's a lot of
Absolutely.
pressure that we put on ourselves too, because we're like, okay, our parents are so distraught, understandably so. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to solve this. And the reality is, at the end of the day, nothing is going to bring your sibling back,
Right.
but you can do things to help yourself, but you don't have to do it all today. You don't have to do
No.
it all tomorrow.
No.
And you just telling Beth's story and your story, Leigh, that's doing something about it,
Yeah.
bringing awareness to this.
And that's
So
really, that's why I
Yeah.
really wanted to do this because
Yeah.
it's for her. Now that she's gone, like I'm not angry. There's no anger. There's no resentment. I do not feel that way at all about her. I feel nothing but love. And I don't know how this will sound, but if someone said they could bring her back, I would say, I don't want you to, because I love her too much to put her back here into that situation again. And I know she feels the same. And she is free. She's free from this torture that she could not get out of. So I wouldn't want her back to be doing all this over again. This was a cancer for her. So sometimes when I actually say the words out loud, I'm like, I really do believe that. I really do believe that she's at peace now. And yeah, I don't know.
I think that's powerful, Leigh, and I really appreciate you sharing that because somebody asked me about 3 to 4 years into my journey. I was doing a podcast that really had nothing to do with this because this podcast hadn't come out yet. And so, but about, I have other stuff that I talk about and do stuff on in businesses. And so I was being interviewed, and this particular person, this was the first time I'd ever been asked like off guard about this. And it was a part of my story, and I was getting comfortable starting to share it. And they asked me that. This person asked me that. Very well-known podcast. And she said to me, she said, would you go back? And I was not expecting this question. She's like, if you could go back in time, would you change what happened? And I was like, that's a really loaded question because my brother died of, right?
Yes.
But I do feel like you feel, Leigh, because, people ask me all the time, they're like, oh God, if you could have him back. And I'm like, of course, if I could see my brother again, I would be like,
If
yeah.
I could give her that another hug or just smell her hair, even
That's
though it's
different,
like cigarettes all the time. Yeah. I'm just like,
that's
if I could
different though,
just
right?
make
Yeah,
her feel, oh my God, I would do anything. Yes.
exactly. But it's not the same thing as saying, would I go back and bring him back in this life because he struggled so much in this life? Now, my story is a little different than yours. I'm not excusing what this guy did to my brother,
Yeah,
obviously. And
absolutely.
you're not excusing what that guy did to your
Yeah.
sister.
He
So they're
it was
actually more
murder.
similar than I
Yeah.
thought. Yeah, it is.
I mean, she was murdered. Yeah.
It is.
She
I believe
didn't.
that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was my next question for you. I'm like,
Yeah.
do you believe that it was
I do.
murder? And so I agree with you. So we have more in common than we realized.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
um,
Absolutely.
but I said the same thing to her when she interviewed me. And that was the first time I really said that. And so I really connect with you when you're saying, like, I'm saying this out loud. And like, I actually really do believe that, because
I do.
I do feel like my brother is feeling a different feeling, vibe, energy than he did here. And this was his story. And this was, this was where he needed to
Yeah.
go to feel at peace. Am I at peace? I don't really believe in that, but I hope other people are with the story, I've acknowledged it, and I'm doing something to change, the trajectory, in talking with amazing siblings like you, Leigh, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I love that you just said that. Like, thank you for
Yeah.
being so vulnerable, because I do feel like that was one of the first times people really judged me, and they were like, how can you say that? And I'm like, because this is his story. And that's
Yeah.
kind of one of the things that propelled me into telling his story. But you have to know and live it to
Yeah.
know and understand what we're saying, Leigh. Like, these our sibling, your sister and my brother, lived a very complicated and difficult life. And so even though the way they passed is also difficult, complicated, and tragic, to feel that they're free and that they're I feel connected with him, and that's why I feel like I'm able to say
I do
that.
too.
Is that kind of
I
right?
do too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That gave me goosebumps.
Yeah.
I feel more connected to my sister than I ever have in her entire physical life.
I just told somebody
do.
that a week ago. That's so crazy. So what makes you feel more connected with her now? I'm curious.
Because she has given me so many gifts. Like, grief changes you, death changes you, and they're undeniable changes. I mean, I'm like, feel like I've found myself, because every single thing that I have feared for the past 25 years happened. I stored that in my body for over 2 decades. And that was somewhere floating around, and it's gone. And guess what I am now? I'm so free and fearless. Like, I feel like I feel like I've opened my eyes for the first time, because I don't have this heaviness, and I'm just fearless. I'll do ask anyone, and like, let's go. We travel all the time. I mean, I'm just not scared anymore. I'm like, we always say to my husband, what's the worst that can happen? It's already happened. Like,
I say
it's
that
already
too.
happened.
Say
Let's
that
go.
too.
Yeah. I'm
Yes.
like, let's go. Let's go.
Mhm.
Let's go. I'm not afraid to be vulnerable. I'm not afraid for tough conversations. I'm not afraid to say no. And I'm not afraid to say yes. And I feel very true to myself. And I feel like I get this strength from my sister, and I feel like she's freaking loving it, because she was
I
always,
even see that in you, and you just said that.
yeah,
You're like, I feel like I get this strength with my
yeah.
sister. She's loving it. Yeah.
She was
I
so
feel like you.
feisty, and I feel like she's like giving me this like thirst for life all of a sudden. I'm just like,
Yeah.
I used to just be scared all the time. I'm not anymore. I feel very free, but I know she's free too. And I know we are living parallel, and I know we're both so happy for each other. And she's like, you go, girl. And I'm like, you go, girl, because I know we are both living our best lives now. And it's love. It's nothing but love. It's nothing but love. And like, I feel it. And I see her. I see little signs of her all the time. Little signs. She'll
Okay,
send
so
me
what
little
are
things.
your signs for Beth? I love this, because I love this conversation. I get asked this all the time. People are like, "What are your signs, from Andreas? Like, what are your signs from your brother?" And I share them, but I'm always curious about other people. And I love that you brought up that you see things from her and she sends you things. So what are some things that you're comfortable sharing that Beth sends you?
Yes, she always had this like thing. It's really weird. She always like had lemons. Always. When she was a kid, she would suck on lemons. She always had lemons in her house. The last night we were together, she had made lemon water and squeezed one into mine and was like, it makes the water so much better. And I've just seen so like everything is just like now my house is like full of lemons and I always have lemons in my fruit bowl. Always. Like I don't
They're good luck, by the way. Lemons
yeah,
in a bowl. Good
yeah.
luck. Yeah.
She'll send me little signs like in photographs I take, like the sun will be shaped like a lemon or she will send me signs. She loved music. Oh my God, she loved music. And certain songs that I know are hers, she'll just come on randomly. Rainbows for sure. Orbs, green orbs and pictures. Just little things that I know. Like I know, well, it's more like I feel her presence and I feel calm. And then like, she'll like send me a little something. Um, I know. And sometimes I don't feel her at all. And that's okay. And I don't feel bad about that. I used to like be like, am I grieving enough? Is this should I be more sad?
Right.
And grief is so interesting because I won't be sad for like 4 weeks or even 6 weeks. And then like out of nowhere, it is like I am fall into my knees with out of nowhere. And it's like a giant wave just like flies into my face. And I'm like, I'm down. But I don't try to, I don't try to be a mess in front of my children, but I also don't try to hide it. And my husband's super supportive and I love talking about her. And I feel like me and my mom have that together. We just talk about her. We look
Yeah.
at pictures and I want to just constantly talk about her with people because that's how I want to keep her alive. I don't want her to be like part of the past. I don't
Yeah.
want that separation of time. I want her to always be in the present. And I feel like that's how I kind of honor her, is to just keep her name around, you know?
Yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, yeah, you're definitely doing that. And thank you for sharing that. I
Yeah.
think, as I mentioned to you, I think much, much earlier, that's why sometimes I still sometimes I talk about my brother in the past. Sometimes I speak of him like
Mhm.
he's still here because he is still with me. And
Mhm.
so I think that's an important message of your story too. Like you're like, I still like she's with me. I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
keep talking about her. And ask you a question, Lee. How was it for your children? Because your children knew
Mhm.
Beth. And
Mhm.
so, a lot of surviving siblings have different dynamics. Sometimes they are fearful because their child never knew their brother or
Mhm.
sister. Sometimes they're fearful because they knew the sister or brother while they
Mhm.
were physically here on this world, on
Mhm.
this planet. So, can you share whatever you're comfortable sharing? How
Yeah.
did you approach that with them? How did you talk to them? And how old were they when you lost Beth?
Let's see. My son was in second grade. So my daughter was in kindergarten. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very young. Or was he in third grade? Second or third grade. My daughter was young enough, like she has memories of Beth. Her and Beth are a lot alike and they have the exact same birthday. It's
Were
wild.
you what's the
They,
when's their birthday?
May 13th.
Oh my gosh, that's so
Yeah.
cool.
They're a lot
Yeah.
they're a lot alike. They're very feisty girls.
Yeah.
But she has really good memories, but my son was affected. We had to take him to a lot of therapy. He developed extreme anxiety, separation anxiety, uh, consistently worried. For little kids like that, like she was around enough that, me and her were not that far off in age that he equated her dying that I was next. I was going to die. So
Right.
yeah, it was heavy. It was very heavy. And we went to some child therapist and there were times that I would just start bawling in therapy because I felt guilt that he was feeling this way, but I felt like a failure or something because I couldn't have protected him more. Um, but they're doing so well now. I mean, they really are. We have videos on my phone. We'll play all the time, and and they'll see me cry sometimes, and
Yeah.
and they'll be like, "Is it Aunt Beth?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's Aunt Beth." And I'll be like, "It's all good. Like this is just love." This right here when I'm crying, it's just love. Like, mommy's not sad. I'm just loving her right now.
Do you feel like
Yeah.
that was helpful to express to them, like, my grief is love, like, my
Yeah.
crying is love? Like, I think that's
Hmm.
really healthy what you've told them, and I think it's
Yeah.
really amazing. Like, how quickly did you guys go into therapy? Because I know you did therapy and your son did therapy. How quickly did you say, "Okay, we need some therapy, we need some help?" Because I feel like that's really helpful for people to know
Mhm.
too, Leah, is like, when do you know? When do you be like, "Okay, it's time for me and
Yeah.
it's time for my child," like both of you, right?
Yeah.
To
It
get that
was
help.
probably, she died in March. It was probably this summer when I started. And then he was like the start of the next school year because things started manifesting at school that I was
Right.
like, oh, okay. Like that's when he was starting because that's when he had to separate from me. So it was a lot of like, okay, wow.
Right.
Okay. Like he had to call, the guidance counselor got involved and I was like, okay, well, we've had a tragic event as a family. So, this is a reason behind his behavior. So, and everyone was wonderful. His school was wonderful. But, oh, yeah. I mean, my grief counselor, she was amazing. Um, but we worked through a lot. I mean, I didn't realize all the grief I had to unpack because I was still unpacking stuff. It brought up like a lot of family issues and,
Well, you had 25 years to
yeah.
unpack, Lee. Like, you had a lot going on, but
Yeah.
because you get in the motions of just
Mhm.
the roller coaster that you're going on and being
Mhm.
that rock in the family, you don't
Mhm.
turn the light on to yourself and go, "Okay, now
Yeah.
it's for time for me to process," and it sounds like you did that finally.
Yes. And, I I decided during that time, like, I wanted all the pain to end with Beth. I wanted any hard feelings towards anybody in my family to just stop, and that's a choice, and that's a choice to and that's powerful to be like, "I don't wanna carry this around with me anymore. I don't want to carry this resentment around with me anymore. You did this, you didn't do this. Well, you enabled, but you didn't even do this, or you could have done more, you could have done less." It's like, no, like, stop. This is continuing to eat our family alive. Like, haven't we lost enough? Um, and I made that decision and I've kept true to it. And we are really functioning well. I really have accepted my parents for who they are and who they were. And I really enjoy my time with them because I know they're hurting too. And we're all getting older. And I don't want to hurt anymore. I don't want to be angry anymore. I don't want to be angry anymore. It will eat you alive. And I want to be free from all that. And I am. I am. I truly am because I made a
Yeah.
choice.
I love that you're talking about this because that's when things changed for me too. I made a choice, which again, most of you guys have listened to my story. So, but I think I get asked this a lot too, Lee, and we're covering so much today.
We really
And
are.
we really are, and I
Mm.
love it, and I hope you guys are loving it too because it is a choice. And sometimes people look at me like I have three heads when I say that because of my story, and then once you hear it, and then like a story like yours is a great example as well. It's a choice. And
Mhm.
it doesn't mean I think people get confused because they're like,
Mhm.
well, I can't just like flip a switch. That's not what we're asking you to do.
Yes,
You
right.
got to look at things, you got
Mhm.
to examine it,
Mhm.
work through it, whether that's therapy, group,
Mhm.
whatever's healthy for you
Mhm.
and whatever works for you, which again, I'm a huge fan of therapy. You probably know
Mhm.
that
Yes,
already, but
yes, yes.
uh, yes, I would not be able to do this right now without therapy. And I think that it is a choice. I agree with you
Mhm.
100% because if you just because you can choose, like, do I want to hold on to the anger or do I want to
Mhm.
like examine everything, work through it, whatever that looks like for
Mhm.
me,
Yes.
and let it go.
Mhm.
And you leave it a lot of people have said on the show too, like, I leave it in the past and, like, I'm able to move
Mhm.
forward. Like, there's really beautiful ways, and we're all kind of speaking the
Mhm.
same language with our own verbiage, and I think
Yes.
that's really beautiful,
Mhm.
and it is a choice, and I
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that you have to make that choice the day after you find your sibling has passed or find out or find
No,
them or
it's a
whatever.
process.
It's
Yeah.
a process, and I think
Yeah.
that's so important to highlight that because
Yeah.
I chose I I was not as advanced as you, Leigh. It was not 2 years into my journey, but it was several years. It took me about 4, 5 years, and then, I came out with the show, and that's when I was able to tell the story, I had released it, and people are like, "How are you not angry at your mom for enabling your brother? How are you not angry at your dad for not being around? How are you not?" And I'm like, "Because who is that serving? Who is that serving?
Right.
Nobody.
Why,
Nobody."
exactly. What is the purpose of that anger? How does that serve? You're absolutely right. It's more dysfunction, it's more pain, and it's not
Yeah.
honoring your sibling that's gone.
No.
It's just feeding what killed them. It's just feeding into all of that sickness. And I want to be, yeah,
Free of it. And you
free,
are.
free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
free. You're free, Leigh. Like, that's
Yeah.
gonna be your quote. You're free, Leigh, and Beth is now
Yes.
too, and I think that's
Yeah.
so amazing. Thank you for being so vulnerable and
No,
open with us today. I appreciate it. Is there anything
absolutely.
else you wanted to touch on, Leigh, that I didn't ask you about today, or any other pieces of advice you wanna give people? Because fentanyl is such an epidemic. It's so sad what's going on. Anything else you wanna share with us before we, wrap up and talk about where to find potentially some fentanyl resources, or if you're comfortable, where people could connect with you if they have any questions for you?
Yeah, you can connect via my email. I'm
Perfect.
I am I'm an open book. A big proponent of fentanyl awareness. I follow a lot of support groups on Facebook, and it just breaks my heart. It's everywhere. So education is key, especially if you have young children. I mean, it's in pills, it's in marijuana, it's in cocaine. I mean, dropping dead instantly. It's all over the place. So just information, become educated. But if there's, again, I'm an open book. If I can help anybody, that's just honoring my sister, and I would be happy to. So my email.
Thank you, Leigh.
Yeah.
Awesome. We'll include it in the show notes. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you for sharing
Right.
your story and
Absolutely.
Beth's story and
Yes.
being here. I appreciate you.
Ah,
And thank you guys so much for listening to Leigh's story and Beth's story. We'll see you back on the next episode.
thank you.
Thanks.